Hello, this is Mrs. Standridge. I'm here with another episode of Raymie Nightingale. Let's get started. Chapter 37. Louisiana and Raymie were in the back seat of the Clark automobile. They were getting the heck out of Dodge. According to Louisiana's grandmother, the authorities were on a rampage, and it would be a good idea for Louisiana to be far, far away from the Elefante homestead. So Louisiana was going to spend the night at Raymie's house. That was Louisiana's grandmother's plan. And at midnight, Beverly Topinski was going to come to Raymie's house, and the three of them, the three rancheros, were going to break into Building 10 and set free a dead cat. That was the rancheros' plan. It was a plan that had been hastily concocted after Louisiana's grandmother left the scene. It was exactly the kind of plan that Mrs. Borkowski would have approved of. Mrs. Borkowski would have laughed. She would have displayed all her teeth, and then she would have said, "Pfft, I wish you luck." "Wasn't that exciting?" said Louisiana as they drove away from Ida Nees. "I wonder who stole Miss Nees' baton." She elbowed Raymie in the ribs. "It was a tempest in a teapot," said Raymie's mother. "That's what it was. Who in the world calls the police about a missing baton?" "I'm excited to be spending the night at your house," said Louisiana. "Is there going to be dinner, Mrs. Nightingale?" There was a pause. "Who are you talking to?" Raymie's mother asked. "I'm speaking to you, Mrs. Nightingale. My name is Mrs. Clark." "Oh," said Louisiana. "I didn't know. I thought that you had the same last name as Raymie." "My last name is Clark, too," said Raymie. "Is it?" said Louisiana. "I thought you were Raymie Nightingale, like the book." "No," said Raymie. "I'm Raymie Clark." Where did Louisiana get such strange ideas? And what would it be like to be Raymie Nightingale? What would it be like to walk the bright and shining path and carry a lamp over your head? "Okay," said Louisiana. "Anyway, is there going to be dinner, Mrs. Clark?" "Of course there's going to be dinner." "Oh, my goodness," said Louisiana. "What will it be?" "Spaghetti." "Or maybe meatloaf," said Louisiana. "I love meatloaf." "I suppose I could make meatloaf," said Raymie's mother. She sighed. Raymie looked out the window. Somewhere her father was getting ready to eat dinner too. She thought about him sitting in the booth at the diner with Leanne Dickerson, holding a menu and smoking his cigarette. She watched Leanne Dickerson reach forward and put her hand on her father's arm. She watched the smoke from her father's cigarette curl up to the ceiling, and suddenly she knew. Her father was not coming back. He was never coming back. "Oof," said Raymie. Her soul shriveled. It felt like someone had punched her in the stomach. "What did you say?" asked Louisiana. "Nothing," said Raymie. "Maybe after dinner we can read aloud from the Nightingale book," said Louisiana. "Granny always reads to me at night." "Sure," said Raymie. After dinner, Raymie's mother watched in astonishment as Louisiana consumed 4 entire pieces of meatloaf and all her green beans. The three of them sat at the dining room table underneath the small chandelier. Louisiana said, "We have a chandelier too, but right now we can't light it up because of the electricity issue. It's nice to have some light. Also, I like this table. This is a very big table." "Yes," said Raymie's mother, "it is." "You could fit a lot of people around this table," said Louisiana. "I suppose so," said Raymie's mother. And then they were silent. Raymie could hear the sunburst clock in the kitchen ticking slowly, methodically. "Your mother is a very good cook," said Louisiana when dinner was over and they were in Raymie's room with the door closed. "But she doesn't talk very much, does she?" "No," said Raymie, "I guess not." She stared up at the light on the ceiling. A moth was fluttering around it hopefully. "Did your father kiss you good night when he lived here?" asked Louisiana. "Sometimes," said Raymie. She didn't want to think about her father anymore. She didn't want to remember him bending over and kissing her forehead or putting his hand on her shoulders. She didn't want to remember him smiling at her. "Granny always kisses me good night," said Louisiana, "and then she gives me kisses from the absent ones. That's my mother and my father and my grandfather. I get 4 kisses." Louisiana sighed. She looked out the window. "There's no one to kiss you good night in the county home. At least that's what I hear. Do you want to read aloud from the Florence Nightingale book now?" "Okay," said Raymie. "I'll go first," said Louisiana. She picked up the book and opened it to the middle and read a single sentence. Florence was lonely. And then she shut the book and opened it again and read a line from page 3. Florence wanted to help. And then she slammed the book shut. "Shouldn't you start from the beginning?" asked Raymie. "Why?" said Louisiana. "This way is much more interesting." She opened the book again. She read the line, "Florence held up the lamp." Outside Raymie's window, the world was dark. "When you read a book this way," said Louisiana, "you never know what's going to happen next. It keeps you on your toes. That's what Granny says. And it's important to be on your toes because you just never know what might happen next in this world." 38. Raymie woke up. The hands on the baby Ben glowed cheerily in the dark. They said it was 1:14. It was past midnight, and Beverly Topinski had not shown up. That meant that they were not going to sneak out of the house and break into Building 10 and steal Archie, who wasn't even there. None of it was going to happen after all. Raymie was disappointed and relieved, both things at the same time. She lay in bed and stared at the clock. It ticked in a satisfied and self-important way, as if it had managed to solve some difficult problem. Raymie got out of bed. By the orangey lights of the nightlight, she could see Louisiana asleep on the floor. A bright and shining path, the life of Florence Nightingale, was open on top of Louisiana's stomach. Her hands were crossed over the book, and her legs were straight out in front of her. It looked as if she had fallen on the battlefield of life. Fallen on the battlefield of life was something that Louisiana had said when they were reading aloud from the book. Florence Nightingale helps those who have fallen on the battlefield of life. She comes to them with her magic globe. "I don't think it's a magic globe," said Raymie. "It's a lantern. It's what people used before electricity." "I know that," said Louisiana. She lowered the book and stared at Raymie. She raised the book again. She said, "She comes to them with her magic globe and makes them well. They don't worry anymore, and they don't wish for things that are gone." Raymie felt her heart thud inside of her. "Where does it say that?" she said. "It's written in the book in my head," said Louisiana. She tapped her head. "And that's sometimes better than the actual book. And by that, I mean that sometimes I read the words I want to be there instead of the words that are actually there, just like Granny does." Louisiana looked up at Raymie in a very serious way. "Do you want me to keep on going?" "Yes," said Raymie. "Good," said Louisiana. "Inside the magic globe that Florence Nightingale carries, there are wishes and hopes and love. And all of these things are very tiny and also very bright. And there are thousands of wishes and hopes and love things, and they move around in the magic globe, and that's what Florence uses to see by. That is how she sees soldiers who have fallen on the battlefield of life. But there comes a time when someone very evil decides to steal Florence Nightingale's magic globe, and that person's name is Marcia Jean. Florence has to fight back. And one of the things she uses is her cloak, which in the nighttime turns into a gigantic pair of wings so that Florence can fly over the battlefields with her magic globe, searching for the wounded. But if Marcia Jean succeeds in stealing the magic globe, then Florence will be flying through darkness and won't see anything at all. And how will she help people then? Louisiana rustled the pages of the book. Do you want me to read you more? She said. Yes, said Raymie. She fell asleep while Louisiana read aloud from a book that didn't exist, and she dreamed that Mrs. Borkowski was sitting in her lawn chair in the middle of the road. And then suddenly Mrs. Borkowski wasn't sitting in the chair. She was standing up and walking away from Raymie. She was walking down a long road, carrying a suitcase. Raymie followed her. Mrs. Borkowski, she called out in her dream. Mrs. Borkowski stopped. She put the suitcase down on its side and opened it slowly. Then she reached into the suitcase and pulled out a black cat and put him down on the ground. For you, said Mrs. Borkowski. Archie, said Raymie. The cat twined himself through her legs. She could hear him purring. Yes, Archie, said Mrs. Borkowski. She smiled, and then she bent over and rummaged through the suitcase. I have another thing for you, she said. She stood up. She was holding a globe of light. Wow, said Raymie. You hold it, said Mrs. Borkowski. She handed the globe to Raymie and then closed the suitcase and picked it up and walked away. Wait, said Raymie. But Mrs. Borkowski was already very far away. Raymie held the magic globe up as high as she could. She watched Mrs. Borkowski until she disappeared. Meow, said Archie. Raymie looked down at the cat. She thought, Louisiana will be so happy. She was right. Archie isn't dead. That was the dream. Raymie remembered it as she stood and considered the sleeping Louisiana. She could hear her lungs wheezing. She looked very small. Suddenly, without any warning at all, Louisiana opened her eyes and sat straight up. Florence Nightingale fell to the floor. Louisiana said, I will do that right away, Granny, I promise. Louisiana, said Raymie. Louisiana blinked. Hello, she said. Hi, said Raymie. Beverly didn't show up. We have to go anyway, said Louisiana. She blinked again. She looked around the room. We have to go and rescue him. We can't do it without Beverly, said Raymie. We don't know how to pick locks. All of Louisiana's bunny barrettes had migrated to one place on her head. They had formed a gigantic clump. Something about the clump of bunny barrettes seemed sad. We will just have to try, said Louisiana. There was a sudden flash of light from outside. Raymie had the ridiculous thought that Florence Nightingale had arrived carrying her great magical globe. But it was not Florence. It was Beverly Topinski. She was standing at the window. She was holding a flashlight up under her chin so that her face looked like a jack-o'-lantern. She was smiling. All right, we're going to end it right there today. I hope you'll come back and join me tomorrow for another few chapters of Raymie Nightingale. Bye.